"You're late," Patricia said as she stepped out onto the driveway, pulling her designer suitcase behind her. I glanced at my watch, 9:02 a.m., barely 2 minutes past our agreed meeting time. The morning sun was already beating down on the freshly washed Mercedes I'd driven over in. "I'm sorry," I said, forcing a smile while climbing out of the driver's seat. Traffic was heavier than expected. But as I moved to help with the luggage, I froze. There was Mackenzie, my stepsister, emerging from the house with her own suitcase and a matching carry-on. My heart dropped to my stomach. "What's going on?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. My stepmother, Patricia, turned to me with that overly bright smile she always wore when she was about to say something particularly cruel. "Oh, Audrey, dear," she began, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "we decided Mackenzie should come instead of you. She's been so stressed lately with her job hunting, and she really needs this break." She said it like she was announcing a slight change in dinner plans, not completely derailing the European vacation I'd spent 2 years planning. My chest tightened as the reality of the situation hit me. "Instead of me?" The words came out barely above a whisper. "Mom, I've been planning this for years. I put everything into this, the hotels, the private tours, all of it. Working overtime at the medical equipment company, saving every commission check, spending countless nights researching the perfect itinerary." Patricia waved her hand dismissively, her gold bracelets catching the morning light. "We're grateful, sweetheart, but you're always so busy with work. You can take another trip later. Mackenzie needs this right now." Mackenzie didn't even attempt to hide her smirk as she adjusted her designer sunglasses, shifting her weight onto one hip. "Thanks for understanding, sis," she said, her tone dripping with the same artificial sweetness as her mother's. The same tone she'd used when she'd borrowed my prom dress in high school and returned it with wine stains. I stared at them both, my hands gripping my car keys so tight the metal dug into my palm. Harrison, my father, shuffled out a moment later, his eyes fixed on the ground as he wheeled his luggage toward me. The sight of him avoiding my gaze only intensified the burning in my chest. "This is unbelievable," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. After 15 years of trying to be the perfect stepdaughter, of accepting Patricia and Mackenzie into our family after my mother's death, this was how they repaid my effort. "This was supposed to be our trip, Dad. Something I planned for us, as a family." "Well, it still is family," Patricia interjected with that infuriating smile, "just with Mackenzie instead. Don't make this a big deal, Audrey. Your sister really needs a break from all that job searching." My name is Audrey, and for the past 2 years, I've been working overtime in medical equipment sales, saving every commission check, every bonus, to give my family a trip they'd never forget. Luxury hotels in Paris, private tours in Rome, exclusive dinner reservations at Michelin-starred restaurants. I'd planned every detail with painstaking care. But as I stood there in the crowded drop-off zone at O'Hare International, watching Mackenzie swagger toward the terminal entrance with her designer luggage, I realized something I'd been avoiding since my father's remarriage. It didn't matter how hard I worked or how much I sacrificed. In their eyes, particularly Patricia's, Mackenzie would always come first. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the bitter words threatening to spill out. Instead, I forced a tight smile and popped the trunk. "Let's get going then," I said, my voice as flat as the Illinois prairie. If they wanted to prioritize her over me, fine. They could go with her, but I wasn't about to let them enjoy the luxury vacation I'd planned and paid for. The drive through Chicago's morning traffic was suffocating, broken only by Mackenzie's incessant chatter from the back seat. "Oh my God, Mom, did you see that TikTok about Paris? The one with that cute cafe near the Eiffel Tower? We have to go there. Do you think we'll have time?" or will those fancy tours Audrey booked take up the whole day? My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, my eyes fixed on the stream of cars ahead. The medical sales reports I needed to review later sat untouched in my briefcase, a reminder of the real world I'd have to return to after this nightmare of a morning. Patricia chuckled softly from the passenger seat. Of course we'll have time, sweetie. We'll figure it out when we get there. She patted her designer handbag, probably already planning which boutiques to visit. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste metal. When we get there. The words echoed in my head. They didn't even seem to notice that I wasn't part of that we anymore. Harrison cleared his throat from the back seat, his voice hesitant. Thank you for driving us, Audrey. I know this probably feels unusual. He caught my eye in the rearview mirror, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the father who'd raised me alone after my mother died, the one who'd attended every school event and celebrated every small victory in my career. Unusual? I let out a hollow laugh. That's an interesting way to put it, Dad. The word betrayal hung unspoken in the air. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, probably wishing he hadn't spoken at all, just like he'd done at every family dinner when Patricia criticized my choice of career or Mackenzie made snide comments about my work hours. Mackenzie leaned forward between the front seats, her expensive perfume filling the car. You're not mad, right? Her voice grated on my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. I mean, this is really big of you, letting me go. I could never have afforded this on my own, what with the job market being so tough right now. As if she'd been doing anything more than half-heartedly scrolling through job listings between Instagram posts. I clenched my jaw and forced what felt like my 100th fake smile of the morning. Of course, Mackenzie. Enjoy the trip. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. By the time we pulled up to O'Hare's International Terminal, my patience was hanging by a thread. The morning sun glinted off the glass and steel structure, a building that should have marked the start of my dream vacation. Instead, I found myself mechanically unloading their luggage, each bag a reminder of the trip I wouldn't be taking. Patricia wrapped me in a perfumed hug, her jewelry cold against my skin. Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. This means a lot to us, and to Mackenzie. Her words felt like tiny daggers, each one precisely aimed. I nodded stiffly, my body rigid. Sure, Mom. The word Mom felt foreign on my tongue, as it had since she'd married my father 10 years ago. Mackenzie beamed as she wheeled her suitcase toward the entrance, her designer sunglasses perched perfectly on her nose. Thanks, Audrey, you're the best. Her voice carried across the busy drop-off area, drawing curious glances from other travelers. If they only knew the reality behind her cheerful farewell. The drive back to my house in the Chicago suburbs was a blur of highway signs and morning traffic. I replayed the morning's conversation in my head on loop, each word cutting deeper than the last. This means a lot to Mackenzie. You're not mad, right? You're always so busy with work. I pulled into my driveway, the same one I'd left just hours earlier, filled with excitement about the trip. Now I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, the medical sales reports in my briefcase suddenly seeming meaningless. Without a second thought, I marched into my home office, pulled out my laptop, and logged into every travel account I'd used to book the trip. The familiar glow of the screen illuminated my face as I systematically dismantled 2 years of planning. 5-star hotel reservations in Paris, cancelled. Private tours of the Vatican, refunded. Michelin-starred restaurant bookings, deleted. First-class airline upgrades, reversed. I stared at the confirmation emails piling up in my inbox, feeling the tightness in my chest start to ease with each cancellation notification. They wanted to take Mackenzie instead of me? Fine, but they wouldn't be staying in luxury hotels or enjoying private tours on my dime. As I closed my laptop, a sense of satisfaction settled over me. Let them explain themselves to the concierge at the Four Seasons Paris. I was done being their doormat. The calls started flooding in as soon as their flight landed. My phone buzzed relentlessly as I unpacked my own suitcase, the one I'd carefully packed with outfits for each planned excursion, each dinner reservation, each museum visit. The irony wasn't lost on me as I hung up my business suits and placed my unworn walking shoes back on the shelf. The buzzing continued, filling my quiet house with its persistent vibration. I sighed, finally picking up the phone and glancing at the screen. Patricia's name flashed across it, accompanied by a barrage of missed calls and increasingly frantic texts. "Audrey, what's going on? The hotel won't let us check in. The reservation is missing. Call me immediately. Audrey, this isn't funny. Fix this now. Audrey, answer your phone." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it, a short, sharp sound that held no humor. Fix this? They really thought I'd swoop in and save the day after what they'd done. The phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Mackenzie. I let it ring out, only for her to leave a voicemail that perfectly captured her entitled attitude. "Audrey, this is so petty," she snapped, her voice shrill with indignation. "We're stuck at this gross airport hotel because of you. You need to call the Four Seasons and fix it now. I already posted about staying there on Instagram." I rolled my eyes and deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. For years, I'd been their fixer, the responsible one who smoothed over every mistake and picked up every slack. The one who'd helped Mackenzie with her college applications while she partied, who'd organized Harrison's surprise birthday party while Patricia took all the credit. Not anymore. Eventually, I decided to answer, if only to stop the endless barrage of calls. Patricia's voice hit me like a tidal wave of anger as soon as I picked up. "Audrey, what did you do? The hotel says all our reservations were canceled, and none of the tours are booked anymore." I let her rant for a moment, listening to the echo of airport announcements in the background. Then, with a calmness that surprised even me, I replied, "I canceled them." There was a long, stunned silence before she hissed, "Why would you do that?" The shock in her voice was almost comical, as if she couldn't fathom the consequences of her own actions. "Oh, I don't know," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm as I paced my living room. "Maybe because you decided to take Mackenzie on my trip? The one I spent 2 years planning and saving for? You're lucky I even drove you to the airport." "We thought you'd understand," she snapped, the familiar guilt-tripping tone creeping into her voice. In the background, I could hear Mackenzie's dramatic sighs and Harrison's murmured attempts to calm them both down. "Understand what?" I asked, my voice rising with each word. That years of saving and planning didn't matter because Mackenzie needed a break from her non-existent job search? That my hard work meant nothing to you? That after 15 years of trying to be part of this family, I'm still an outsider? Guess what, Mom? I don't understand, and I don't care to. I hung up before she could respond and turned my phone off, tossing it onto the couch. The silence that followed was blissful, and for the first time since that morning, I felt like I could breathe. If they wanted to prioritize Mackenzie, fine, but they could figure out their European adventure without my carefully planned itinerary. The silence lasted exactly 1 day. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing again with calls and messages from every member of my fractured family. At first, I ignored them, focusing instead on my work reports and the stack of medical equipment catalogs I needed to review. I spent the day cleaning my house and catching up on work presentations, but by evening, curiosity got the better of me. Taking a deep breath, I opened my phone and braced myself for the storm. The texts cascaded across my screen. From Patricia, "Audrey, you've gone too far. Your sister is in tears, and your father is furious. We can't get into any of the hotels you booked. Is this how I raised you to behave?" From Mackenzie, "You're acting like a child. I don't get why you're making this such a big deal. My Instagram followers were counting on those travel posts. Just fix it already." And finally, from Harrison, "We need to talk, sweetheart. This isn't right. Your mother is very upset." I set the phone down on my kitchen counter, shaking my head as I prepared my evening tea. For years, I'd been the one to fix things, to make sure everyone was comfortable and happy. The responsible medical sales rep who could always be counted on to smooth things over, just like I smoothed over deals with difficult clients. I poured hot water over my tea bag, watching the steam rise as I let the anger simmer. How dare they expect me to clean up their mess? How dare they act like I was the one in the wrong? The timer on my phone chimed, another call, right on schedule. "Audrey." Patricia barked before I could even say hello. "This isn't funny anymore. We're stranded at a terrible hotel. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" I took a slow sip of my tea, savoring the warmth. Embarrassing? You think this is embarrassing? Try saving for 2 years, planning every detail of a family vacation, only to be told you're not even part of the family anymore. "Stop being dramatic," she snapped, her voice echoing in what sounded like a budget hotel lobby. "Mackenzie needed this more than you. She's been having such a hard time with her job search. And now she can figure it out," I said firmly, walking to my home office where the canceled reservation confirmations still sat in my email inbox. "You made your decision, Mom. You wanted to take Mackenzie instead of me? Fine, but don't expect me to fund her luxury vacation while I sit at home alone." "We're family," she hissed. The word family hit like a punch to the gut, the same word she'd used when she'd first married my father, promising we'd all be one happy unit. "We don't do this to each other." I let out a bitter laugh, staring at the family photo on my desk, taken at my father's wedding to Patricia, before everything changed. "Funny, I was just thinking the same thing." Mackenzie's voice came through the background, whining as always. "Mom, just hang up on her. She's being impossible. I can't believe I have to stay in this gross hotel." That was the final straw. "Enjoy your trip," I said, my tone glacial. "Oh wait, you can't, because it's not your trip. It was mine, and now it's nobody's. Goodbye." I hung up before she could respond and turned my phone off again. For the rest of the evening, I felt an odd mix of anger and relief, anger that they'd put me in this position, but relief that I'd finally stood up for myself. They could call me dramatic all they wanted. For the first time since my father's remarriage, I wasn't letting them take advantage of me. The next few days were blissfully quiet. With my phone turned off, I finally had space to think clearly, free from the barrage of guilt trips and accusations. I spent my mornings on my back porch, sipping coffee and reviewing client presentations, finding peace in the routine I'd always loved, but Patricia had dismissed as working too hard. My afternoons were filled with sales calls and meetings, catching up on the medical equipment orders I'd slightly neglected while planning their trip. Each successful sale reminded me of how capable I was when I wasn't bogged down by their endless demands and Mackenzie's constant drama. By the third day, curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone back on to find over a dozen voicemails waiting. Each one told its own story of entitlement and manipulation. The first few from Patricia, growing increasingly hysterical, "Audrey, you need to call me back right now. This has gone too far. We're staying in a 2-star hotel. I can't believe you're doing this." You've humiliated us. We're your family. How could you treat us this way? Then came Mackenzie's messages, dripping with her usual entitled tone. This is so petty, even for you. My followers are asking why I'm not posting from the Four Seasons. You're ruining everything. I had to delete my Paris posts. Just fix it, Audrey. I can't believe you're being such a drama queen. And finally, Harrison's voice, quieter but no less pointed. Audrey, sweetie, I don't understand what's happened to you. Call us back so we can sort this out. Your mother is very upset. I hesitated before playing the final voicemail, a long one from Patricia. Her voice was quieter this time, tinged with frustration and exhaustion. Audrey, she began, we're back at the airport now. The trip is ruined, and I hope you're happy with yourself. Your sister is devastated, and your father and I are, well, disappointed doesn't even begin to cover it. Call us when you're ready to talk about your behavior. I deleted the voicemails without replying. I wasn't ready to talk, and honestly, I didn't know if I ever would be. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was the culmination of years of them putting Mackenzie first and expecting me to accept it with a smile. As I sat in my home office, surrounded by medical sales reports and client presentations, I found myself reflecting on all the times I'd been overlooked or dismissed, every holiday where Mackenzie's whims dictated the plans, every family gathering where my sales achievements were treated as afterthoughts while they fawned over Mackenzie's latest Instagram follower count. This trip had been the breaking point, but the cracks had been forming since that day 15 years ago when Patricia and Mackenzie first walked into our lives, promising to be the family we'd lost when my mother died. That evening, Ramona stopped by unannounced, carrying 2 cups of coffee from our favorite local cafe and an unmistakable look of curiosity. She'd been my closest friend since college, the one person who'd witnessed every step of my family's transformation. I heard about what happened, she said, setting the coffee on my kitchen counter. Patricia called me yesterday. Of course she had. My stepmother had always been good at recruiting allies when she wanted to guilt me into compliance. And? I asked, taking a sip of the perfectly made latte. Ramona's job as a counselor had taught her the value of listening without judgment, and right now, that's exactly what I needed. Ramona shrugged, a sly smile creeping across her face. I told her you were probably busy with work and would get back to her when you were ready. I laughed, shaking my head. You're the best. No, you're the best, she said, her tone suddenly serious, because you finally stood up for yourself. I know how hard that is, Audrey. Don't let them drag you back down. Her words stuck with me long after she left. Ramona was right. I'd spent too long bending over backward to please people who never seemed to care about my efforts. It was time to break that cycle once and for all. By the time the weekend rolled around, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The anger was still there, simmering under the surface, but it was joined by something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. Freedom from their endless expectations, freedom from being the family's fixer, freedom to finally live on my own terms. But, as expected, the silence didn't last. It was Sunday afternoon, and I was reviewing proposals for a new line of cardiac monitors, when I finally got a call that I decided to answer. This time, it was Harrison. Audrey, he began, his voice heavy with weariness, your mother wanted me to call. She thinks you'll listen to me. Go on, I said, leaning back in my office chair, looking at the sales awards lining my wall, achievements that had always seemed to pale in comparison to Mackenzie's social media successes. He let out a sigh. Look, this has all gotten out of hand. Your mother's upset, Mackenzie's furious, and, well, it's just a mess. But you're better than this. I stiffened, his words igniting a fresh wave of anger. Better than what, Dad? Standing up for myself? Refusing to let you walk all over me again? That's not what I meant, he said quickly. It's just, you've always been the reasonable one, the one who keeps everything together. This isn't like you. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. You're right, it's not like me, because I'm not bending over backward to clean up your mess anymore. He paused, and for a moment, I thought he might finally understand, but then he said, "You're punishing the whole family over one decision. Is that really fair?" Fair? I repeated, rising from my desk chair to pace my office. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you and Patricia decided I wasn't important enough to be part of the trip I planned? Was it fair when you replaced me with Mackenzie like I didn't matter? Was it fair when you stood there in the airport and said nothing? That's not what we were trying to do, he said, his tone defensive now. We just thought Mackenzie needed it more. She's been struggling with her job search, and… Of course you did, I snapped, stopping in front of the window overlooking my carefully tended garden, another accomplishment Patricia had dismissed as a waste of time. You always think she needs more attention, more support, more of everything. And I'm always the one expected to sacrifice for her. Not anymore. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, he said, I don't know what you want me to say. I don't need you to say anything, I replied, my voice steady. I just need you to understand that I'm done being the afterthought. From now on, I come first in my own life. Audrey. Goodbye, Dad. I ended the call and set the phone down, my hands trembling. For the rest of the day, I let myself feel everything: anger at their betrayal, sadness for the family relationship I'd tried so hard to build, and relief at finally standing my ground. It wasn't easy, but it felt like the start of something new. I wasn't the family's fixer anymore, and I wasn't going to be. When my father, Patricia, and Mackenzie finally returned, I was waiting for them at their house. I'd parked my Mercedes in their driveway, sipping coffee from my travel mug and feeling surprisingly calm as I watched their airport taxi pull up. As they stepped out, dragging their suitcases behind them, their faces were a mix of exhaustion and irritation. Mackenzie was the first to speak, her designer sunglasses now perched uselessly on her head in the evening light. Well, I hope you're happy, Audrey. Her voice carried across the manicured lawn her mother was so proud of. I raised an eyebrow, staying seated on the porch swing where I'd spent so many evenings as a teenager, before Patricia and Mackenzie entered our lives. Happy about what? Our trip was a disaster. Patricia snapped, waving her hand as if to brush away the entire fiasco. We spent the entire week staying in horrible hotels and eating terrible food because we couldn't afford anything decent. And don't get me started on the tours. Mackenzie chimed in, crossing her arms over her wrinkled designer blouse. Oh wait, there weren't any. Do you know how embarrassing it was to show up and be told there was no reservation? My Instagram is ruined. I took another sip of coffee, letting their complaints wash over me. Sounds rough, I said finally, my voice calm. But you wanted to take Mackenzie, remember? I'm sure you all had some great bonding time. That's not the point. Patricia shot back, her voice rising to that familiar pitch she used when things weren't going her way. You knew we couldn't afford all the things you'd planned. You set us up to fail. I stood up, setting my mug down on the small table next to the porch swing. No, Mom, I didn't set you up for anything. I planned a trip for the four of us, something special I'd been saving for years. You're the ones who decided to cut me out at the last second. Harrison finally spoke up, his tone quieter but no less accusatory. You didn't have to cancel everything, Audrey. That was extreme. Was it? I asked, folding my arms. Why should I have paid for a trip I wasn't even invited to? If Mackenzie needed it so badly, you should have planned it yourselves. You're lucky I didn't cancel the return flight. Mackenzie rolled her eyes, pulling out her phone as if to check her social media notifications. You're so dramatic. It's just money, Audrey. And you're so entitled. I shot back, my carefully maintained composure finally cracking. Do you have any idea how much work and sacrifice went into planning that trip? Or do you just assume things magically appear for you because someone else takes care of it? They stood there, stunned into silence by my outburst. The evening sun cast long shadows across the driveway as I continued, my voice steady but firm. I've spent years being the responsible one, I said, gesturing to my medical sales awards visible through my car window. The one who fixes things, plans things, makes sure everything runs smoothly. And you've spent just as long taking it all for granted. That's not fair, Patricia started, but I held up a hand to stop her. No, Mom, what's not fair is how you treated me. You chose Mackenzie over me, like always, so I chose to stop being your doormat. You didn't want me on the trip? Fine, but you don't get to enjoy the benefits of my hard work without me. I grabbed my bag from the porch swing and turned to leave. I'm glad you're back safely, but don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I'm done. As I walked to my car, I heard them calling after me, their voices a mix of anger and guilt, but I didn't look back. The drive home from my parents' house felt strange, peaceful. For years, every visit had left me emotionally drained, especially after client meetings and sales presentations, but this time I felt lighter. When I got back to my house, I made a cup of tea and sat on my couch, replaying the confrontation in my head. They'd been so sure I'd fold, that I'd given like always, but watching their stunned faces as I walked away was a reminder of how much I'd changed. They could be angry, hurt, or embarrassed, it didn't matter anymore. I was done living my life to meet their expectations. Picking up my phone, I saw a text from Ramona. How did it go? I did it, I replied. I finally stood up for myself. Proud of you, she texted back. Dinner tomorrow? Absolutely, I responded, smiling for the first time that evening. The next day, I got a call from Ramona during my lunch break between client meetings. So tell me everything, she said, not bothering with pleasantries. How are you feeling after yesterday? I laughed, leaning back in my office chair. Exactly like you'd imagine. They're furious. Mackenzie's pouting about her ruined social media plans, and Patricia is probably trying to figure out how to guilt me back into line. Ramona let out a snort. Let her try. You've got a backbone now, and I'm here to make sure it stays in place. I grinned, grateful for her unwavering support. Thanks, Ramona. I mean it. You've been my rock through all of this. Anytime, she said, her voice softening. So, what's next for you now that you're not playing family fixer anymore? That question had been circling in my mind since the confrontation. What was next? For years, so much of my energy had been poured into trying to please my family, trying to earn their approval. Now that I'd let go of that burden, the possibilities felt endless and a little intimidating. I don't know yet, I admitted, looking at the travel brochures still sitting on my desk. But I feel like I get to decide. Not them, not anyone else, just me. Sounds like the start of something amazing, Ramona said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Maybe we could plan that trip to Italy you always talked about? Maybe, I replied, already feeling a spark of excitement. But this time, I'll be planning it for someone who actually appreciates it. Over the next few weeks, I started making small changes that felt big in their own way. I redecorated my home office, replacing the family photos with artwork I'd always loved but Patricia had called too modern. I spent weekends exploring Chicago's medical technology conventions and local parks, things I'd always meant to do but never made time for between family obligations and Mackenzie's endless crises. I started journaling too, writing down my thoughts and dreams without filtering them through the lens of what my family might think. Each small step felt like reclaiming a part of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. One evening, I sat down with my laptop and opened the spreadsheet I'd used to plan their trip. The canceled reservations stared back at me, but this time I didn't feel a pang of regret. Instead, I felt a surge of determination. That money had been meant for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I wasn't going to let it go to waste. Closing the spreadsheet, I opened a new browser tab and typed solo travel ideas. A few weeks later, I booked a trip to Italy, not the same itinerary I'd planned for them, but something entirely my own. This wasn't about proving a point anymore. This was for me, a chance to celebrate my independence and finally put myself first. The moment I landed in Rome, I felt a surge of excitement and nervousness. I'd never traveled alone before, but as I stepped out of the airport and into the bustling city, I knew I'd made the right decision. Between meetings with European medical equipment suppliers, I spent my days wandering cobblestone streets, marveling at ancient ruins, and indulging in meals at charming little cafes. There was no schedule to keep, no one else's preferences to consider, just me and the freedom to do exactly what I wanted. One afternoon, while sitting on the Spanish steps with a gelato in hand, I pulled out the journal I'd brought with me. For years, I'd written about what I wanted to achieve, but those dreams were always wrapped up in making someone else happy, organizing family events, supporting Mackenzie's latest schemes, trying to earn Patricia's approval. Now, as I wrote, the focus shifted. Learn Italian. Expand my medical sales territory. Travel to at least 5 more countries. Start my own medical equipment consulting firm. The list grew, each goal a reflection of the life I wanted to create, not the one I'd been expected to live. On my last night in Florence, I had dinner at a small, family-run restaurant overlooking the Arno River. As I watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a deep sense of peace. This trip had been more than just a vacation, it was a turning point. I'd spent so much of my life trying to earn my family's approval, but here, thousands of miles away, I realized something important: I didn't need it. I was enough, just as I was. When I returned home, my phone showed several missed calls from Patricia and Mackenzie, this time with softer tones and carefully worded messages. "Hope you had a nice trip," one text from Patricia read. "Maybe we can all talk soon." I stared at the message for a moment before setting my phone down. I wasn't ready to reply, and that was okay. This time, it would be on my terms. As I unpacked my suitcase and placed souvenirs on my shelves, including a small replica of the Colosseum for my office, I felt a sense of pride. For the first time in 15 years, I was living life on my own terms, and it felt absolutely right.